All right, so let's take a deep dive into UnitedHealth Group. UNH, as most people know it. We've got a whole stack of stuff to look at here. Financial statements and analyst reports. Oh, and some news articles that are pretty disturbing, honestly. We're going to unpack all of it today, help you understand what's really important for the future of this company.
Yeah. UNH is a fascinating company. I mean, they're a true giant in the healthcare world. But they're facing some pretty serious headwinds right now. It's honestly kind of like a real-life corporate thriller playing out.
Okay, well, I guess we have to address the elephant in the room then, right? The CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, he was found dead outside his hotel. And it wasn't just, a random death or something. This was a targeted attack, maybe related to, I don't know, anger over health insurance practices.
Hmm.
The police found bullets with words etched onto them, things like deny and defend. I mean, it's pretty
Yeah.
chilling stuff.
Yeah. It is a tragedy for sure. And the motive's still not clear at this point. But it definitely raises some questions about just the pressure cooker environment in healthcare right now and how all this might impact UNH moving forward.
Totally. And speaking of impact, let's look at their stock. It initially jumped after they released their 2025 earnings outlook.
Yeah.
Things were looking pretty good. And then, bam, the stock plunged. It had its worst week since the pandemic shut down back in March 2020. And it wasn't just them. Other managed care stocks also took a hit. What do you think is going on?
I think investors are spooked. I mean, they see UNH's potential, but they also see some serious risks on the horizon. So let's dig into the numbers for a second. Their revenue in 2023 hit $392 billion. That's massive. Their earnings per share, EPS, or in other words, the profit for each share of stock, was $15.39. But raw numbers only tell you part of the story.
Right. We need to see how they stack up against other companies. I think you've got a chart there with competitor data.
Yeah, I do. Let's look at the price to earnings ratio. That's the PE ratio. It basically tells you how the market values a company. UNH's PE ratio is 33.81, which is high compared to some of their competitors. Humana, for example, is at 24.04. Centene is at 12.68. Cigna, 15.01. And Elevance Health, 23.86. So investors seem to be betting on UNH's future growth. But it also could mean that they're overvalued, especially given all the uncertainty surrounding the company right now.
Okay, so high PE ratio. A lot of growth baked into that price, it seems.
Yeah.
What about debt? How leveraged are they compared to the other companies?
Yeah, another really key metric to look at is the debt-to-equity ratio. It basically tells us how much debt a company is using to finance its operations compared to their equity. So for UNH, their debt-to-equity ratio is 1.47. So that means that they have more debt than equity.
That sounds kind of risky.
It can be, but again, context is important. Humana, for example, has a debt-to-equity ratio of 1.15. Centene is lower at 0.98. Cigna is at 1.36. And Elevance Health comes in at 1.09. So UNH is a bit more leveraged than its peers, but not dramatically so.
Okay, so they're all playing the debt game to some degree. It's like high-stakes poker in the healthcare world. But what gives UNH an advantage in this game? What are their economic moats? The things that make it difficult to compete with them.
Well, I think the biggest one is their size. Just their sheer size and scale give them huge bargaining power with hospitals and other providers, and they can spread costs more efficiently. This is a classic economic moat, being so big that it's difficult for smaller companies to catch up.
Right. They're like the Walmart of healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to compete with that kind of reach.
Exactly. And they've also built a really strong brand reputation over the years. In healthcare, trust is everything, and UNH has really capitalized on that, especially with their Medicare and retirement segment.
Makes sense.
Mm.
People want to feel confident about who's handling their health care,
Mm-hmm.
especially as they get older.
All right.
So what else makes them stand out?
Well, they're a leader in this shift towards value-based care. It's a model that basically prioritizes better outcomes for patients at lower costs. And their data analytics arm Optum. That gives them a massive advantage in today's healthcare world, where data is everything. They're using data to personalize care, predict risks, and even develop new treatments.
Wow, that's powerful. They're not just managing healthcare, they're trying to transform it. But you mentioned some serious challenges that UNH is facing. What's putting the brakes on their growth?
Well, the healthcare industry in general is kind of a mess right now. Hospitals are getting more aggressive with their billing practices, often shifting inpatient procedures to outpatient settings just so they can charge more. And this puts pressure on insurers like UNH to manage costs.
So same procedure, different location, bigger bill. That doesn't sound very patient-friendly.
It's a complex issue. But yeah, it's a real headache for UNH. They're trying to address it through what they call utilization management. But it requires a pretty fundamental shift in how they work with hospitals and healthcare systems.
It sounds like they need to figure out how to get hospitals to focus on value instead of just, racking up charges. Can't imagine that's easy. What other issues are they dealing with?
The Medicaid landscape is a big one. A lot of states are using outdated data to set Medicaid rates, and those rates don't reflect the higher needs of the patients who are now on Medicaid after all the recent redeterminations. It's creating a funding gap, and UNH is pushing for states to make adjustments more quickly.
So the people who need Medicaid the most, they're being shortchanged by these outdated rates. That's got to be a tough situation.
It is. And then there's the cyber attack. On Change Healthcare, which UNH acquired last year, that attack has really disrupted their operations, it's increased their medical costs, and it's led to a massive data breach, which could mean more legal trouble and reputational damage down the road.
Yeah, it's a reminder that our healthcare system is really vulnerable in this digital age.
Absolutely. And it's just another layer of complexity on top of all the other challenges UNH is facing. They're dealing with internal and external pressures, all while trying to figure out how to navigate a rapidly changing industry.
Okay, so it sounds like UNH is in the hot seat, dealing with a CEO's murder, a cyber attack, and a whole bunch of industry challenges. It's like they're juggling chainsaws while riding a unicycle on a tightrope.
Uh-huh. That's a good way to put it. But they're not giving up. They're actually making some pretty big moves to adapt and grow. They're not just sitting back and taking it. They're pushing forward with some ambitious initiatives to modernize their business and to take advantage of the changing healthcare landscape.
All right, so they're not going down without a fight. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. We need to figure out how they plan to deal with these challenges and how they're going to position themselves for the future. What's next in our deep dive?
Yeah, so despite all these challenges, UNH is still charging ahead. They've set a growth target of 8% for 2025.
That's quite a bit lower than their usual 13 to 16%. Are they being cautious, or is there something else going on?
They're calling it responsible growth. Basically, they're acknowledging the headwinds, and they want to emphasize their commitment to making long-term investments. Even if it means slower growth in the short term, they think it's the best way to build a sustainable business for the future.
So it's like taking a deep breath and getting ready for a marathon instead of a sprint.
Exactly. And they're focusing on several key initiatives to make this happen. First, they're rolling out a national gold card program. The idea is to reduce the need for prior authorizations. For qualified in-network providers, they estimate it could eliminate like 500,000 prior authorizations every year.
That's huge. I mean, anyone who's dealt with healthcare knows how frustrating those prior authorizations can be. It's like a constant roadblock to getting the care you need. Streamlining that process could be a big win for patients and providers.
Absolutely. They're also going all in on artificial intelligence, AI. They want to implement it across the whole organization, from clinical documentation to consumer interactions. Imagine AI helping nurses review documentation more efficiently, summarizing patient histories, even guiding consumer interactions and provider searches.
Wow, AI is about to touch every part of their business. Is this UNH trying to stay ahead of the curve, or are they playing catch-up?
Well, healthcare has been slower to adopt AI compared to other industries, but UNH seems to be recognizing its potential. And they're really making a push to integrate it into everything they do. If they can pull it off, it could give them a big advantage.
Okay, streamlined authorizations, AI integration. What else is on the agenda?
Well, remember that cyber attack we talked about? They're trying to turn that lemon into lemonade. They're using the lessons learned from that attack to build a more secure and modernized tech platform, especially within Optum Insight, their data and analytics arm.
So they're taking a hit, but using it as an opportunity to upgrade their systems and come back stronger. That's a smart move.
Yeah, turning adversity into an advantage. And they're also continuing to invest heavily in value-based care, especially with their Medicare Advantage plans. And through partnerships with innovative providers like Kelsey-Seybold, they see this model as the key to improving patient outcomes, controlling costs, and just generally differentiating themselves in the market.
But didn't you say earlier that some hospitals are pushing back against value-based care because they're so used to the old fee-for-service model? How are they dealing with that resistance?
It's a challenge for sure. UNH is trying to partner with hospitals and health systems that are aligned with their vision for value-based care. And they're also advocating for policy changes that would support the transition to this new model.
So they're taking a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
Finding willing partners, pushing for policy changes, and investing in their own capabilities to make value-based care work.
Exactly. And they're also tackling the issue of high drug prices. They're advocating for policies that would lower those costs. And they're leveraging their pharmacy benefits management business, OptumRx, to negotiate better prices with drug companies and to make sure their members have access to affordable medications.
So they're trying to influence the system from the outside through policy advocacy, while also making changes within their own operations to control costs.
Right. It's a comprehensive approach to a very complex problem.
Okay, but all this sounds very ambitious.
Mhm.
Are they really committed to these goals, or is this just corporate PR? How do we know they're actually going to do this stuff?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. We're going to have to watch what they actually do over the next few years. Actions speak louder than words, especially in the corporate world.
I agree. But let's not forget the human element here. We started this deep dive with the shocking news of the CEO's murder. How do you think that event might shape UNH's future, beyond just the immediate disruptions?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely a turning point for the company. I mean, they've lost a key leader. And the circumstances of his death have created a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. It could lead to changes in leadership strategy, even company culture.
And it raises questions about the safety of healthcare executives in general, and the level of anger and distrust directed at the industry. How does a company like UNH even begin to address those issues?
It's a tough situation. They have to be sensitive to the concerns of their employees, their customers, the public. They need to show that they're committed to transparency, accountability, and ethical conduct.
They need to show that they're more than just a profit-driven corporation,
Hmm.
that they care about the people they serve and the impact they have on society.
Absolutely. This tragedy could actually be a catalyst for positive change. It could force UNH to reevaluate their priorities and their role in the healthcare ecosystem.
This is getting really deep. We're not just talking about financial performance anymore. We're talking about the very soul of the company and the impact of their decisions on people's lives.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're seeing a company at a crossroads. They're grappling with these huge challenges, and they're making some risky bets on the future. The stakes are high, and the outcome is totally uncertain.
So we've got a company facing internal turmoil, external pressures, and a whole lot of uncertainty. But they're also making big moves to adapt and innovate. They're pushing for a future where healthcare is more efficient, more personalized, and more data-driven. But will they succeed?
To answer that, we need to look at their specific plans for 2025. They call it responsible growth. But can they actually deliver on their promises?
They've got a lot to prove. They need to show they can handle all this turbulence, manage costs effectively, and execute these ambitious plans.
And they need to do it all while dealing with the fallout from the CEO's murder and the cyber attack. They've got to rebuild trust with the public, their employees, and their investors.
This is getting exciting. I can't wait to see what happens next. So let's dive into their 2025 outlook and see what they've got planned. All right, let's get into the details of UNH's 2025 outlook. They're projecting 8% growth, which, seems kind of modest compared to what they've done in the past. But you said there's more to the story than just that number.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that they're not trying to sugarcoat things. They're being very upfront about the challenges they're facing, but they're also laying out a vision for a pretty big transformation of their business.
So they're lowering expectations but also raising the stakes. Kind of a bold move, don't you think?
It is. They're betting big on innovation and technology, even if it means, some bumps in the road along the way. They're really thinking long term here, not just about next quarter's earnings.
So what are some of the specific challenges they're expecting in 2025?
Well, for one, they'll be dealing with the second year of those CMS Medicare rate cuts. That's going to continue to squeeze their Medicare Advantage business, which is a big chunk of their revenue.
Right. And you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act. How's that going to affect them?
Yeah, the biggest impact from that legislation is expected to hit in 2025. So they're basically facing a double whammy of government-mandated funding reductions.
Ouch. That's got to be tough even for a company as big as UNH. Anything else on the horizon?
Well, that Medicaid rate mismatch we talked about, with states using outdated data, that's likely to continue as well. It's putting a strain on their Medicaid business.
And we can't forget the cyber attack on Change Healthcare.
Right. They're still trying to fully recover from that, both in terms of their technology and their reputation. It's going to require a lot of ongoing investment, and it could keep impacting their bottom line for a while.
So they're heading into 2025 with a lot of challenges. It sounds almost overwhelming, but you're saying they're not giving up?
No, not at all. In fact, they're doubling down on their commitment to modernization and innovation. They see these challenges as opportunities to make some fundamental changes and to come out of this as an even stronger player in the healthcare industry.
So they're embracing the storm and hoping to come out stronger on the other side? It's a high-risk, high-reward strategy. But what could go wrong? What are the potential pitfalls here?
Well, the healthcare industry is really complex and it's very resistant to change. There's a real risk that their plans could run into roadblocks from providers, regulators, or even consumers.
And no one can predict the future. Some unexpected event could throw them off course, like another pandemic or a sudden recession.
Those are definitely possibilities. And even with the best plans, there's always the risk of execution failures, integrating AI, streamlining processes, modernizing their technology. Those are all complex projects, and any problems along the way could delay their progress and hurt their results.
So a lot could go wrong, even if they're on the right track. But let's look at the other side of the coin. What if they succeed? What's the best case scenario?
Well, if they can pull off this transformation, they have the potential to become the leader in this new era of healthcare, a healthcare system that's more personalized, data-driven, and focused on value.
So they could be the ones setting the standards, shaping the industry, and ultimately benefiting from a more efficient and profitable model.
Exactly. And their investments in AI and data analytics, those could give them a big advantage in developing new treatments, personalizing care, and even predicting health risks. They could be at the forefront of a healthcare revolution.
Okay, so potentially a game changer for the whole industry. But let's bring this back to our listeners. Why should they care about what UNH is doing in 2025? How does this affect them directly?
Well, UNH is more than just a company. They're kind of a bellwether for the entire healthcare system. What they do is their successes and their failures. They have ripple effects throughout the industry. They impact providers, patients, and investors.
Right, so if their vision for this new kind of healthcare system comes true, it could mean better outcomes, lower costs, and a more personalized experience for everyone.
And on the other hand, if they fail, if their plans fall apart, it could mean more instability and higher costs. In a system that's already struggling, the stakes are high, and the outcome will affect the health and well-being of millions of people.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We talked about the murder of UNH's CEO, the cyber attack, their financial performance industry, trends, their plans for the future. What's the key takeaway for our listeners?
I think the main point is that UNH is at a crossroads. They're facing a ton of challenges, unlike anything they've seen before, but they're also making bold moves to adapt and innovate. They're kind of a microcosm of the changes happening in the healthcare industry, reflecting the struggle to balance rising costs with new technology and changing expectations.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story, and it's unfolding right now. High stakes, uncertain outcomes, and the potential to really change the healthcare system as we know it. It's a
Yeah.
company worth watching, for sure.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, here's a final thought for you to consider. How will the murder of Brian Thompson and the public's reaction to it shape UNH's long-term strategy? Will it force them to rethink their approach to cost management, their relationships with providers, or even their role in the healthcare system as a whole?
That's a great question, and one we'll all be thinking about as we continue to follow UNH's journey. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another look at the business world.